My calculations are correct. When this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're gonna see some serious
It has begun!
Calm down, Doctor. Now is not the time for fear.
Trying to misbehave.
Give them nothing, but take from them everything!
Program complete. Enter when ready.
Greetings once again, my friends, and welcome back to Geek News Movie Night, where we take a movie that you guys voted on, and we analyze it, dissect it, and enjoy it, and come here and talk about it, because it's an amazing thing. I am your host, Adam Mickelson, aka Drac. I hope everybody's having an awesome day or night when you're listening to this. And joining me for this panel is my fellow panel of usual geeks, content creators, all of the above. And we'll start things off with Alex the Shadow Blazer. Alex, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right, I guess. Just hanging in there. It's a lovely time for retail.
Yes. It's the most stressful time of the year.
Indeed it is.
Yes. And then also joining us is Brinton Volley. Brinton, how are you?
Am doing good, all things considered.
Yes, this month has been very stressful for all of us. I think it's safe to say. But thankfully, we get to sit back and talk a movie that we were all able to see. And this actually was a starting tradition with this particular podcast, because I actually held a watch party where we watched the film together. And we actually at least had one person in there that was watching it for the first time. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to join us, but I actually would have loved to have brought him on, which was Rising Sun. Rising Sun had never seen this, and I would have loved to have gotten his analysis on it. But today, we are talking the best or only decent Transformers movie that actually exists. Yes, I said it, Michael Bay fans, and I will not regret that. We're talking Transformers the movie, 1986 version, so that there's no confusion with the 2007 film. And really quick, I just got to go through the panel because I'm an old fart. So if people can't already tell, I've seen this movie so many times. I can quote it. I don't need any promptings or whatever. I can quote scenes from this film. I like it that much. But I'm guessing with both of you, it was probably your first experience with it, wasn't it?
This is accurate.
And it is my first time, yes.
Yes. Okay. So, at that point, I mean, we'll get into the overall opinions of everything, but just sum it up. What did you guys think of this film?
I guess I'll go first then.
I was gonna say which one of us wants to go first.
I guess it could just be like, well, yeah, it was okay. I guess it's kind of what I would have expected for a 80s kids movie based on a popular TV show for the day.
Yeah. Brinton, what about you?
It was a movie.
Oh my gosh. Well, I probably have the bias just because I grew up with Transformers and love it. But yeah, we're talking Transformers the movie, 1986, with a huge cast of not just the usual cast from the Transformers series, but then they decided to bring in a bunch of celebrities to come and do roles. For example, Leonard Nimoy coming in to play Galvatron. You had Judd Nelson, who is playing the up-and-coming young Autobot rebel Hot Rod. You even had, I can't even remember his name.
Robert Stack.
Robert Stack playing Ultra Magnus. And then I especially love the voice actor that came in for season 3 because he was trying to do a Robert Stack impression. And also John Machida. How many people actually remember who John Machida is?
I have no idea who he is.
Actually, you do. If you've watched the Micro Machines commercials.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So John Machida actually, I don't know if he still holds the title, but he held the Guinness World Record for world's fastest speaker. And that was his gimmick. So that's why he got the Micro Machine commercials, and that's why he got the role of Blur in this film. So you had all of those. You even had Orson frickin' Welles coming in here, and actually, this is a great way to be able to go into some of the fun facts of this film. This was Orson Welles' final film before he died at the age of 70.
Yep,
Way to go out on.
this was accurate information.
So for those who don't know, Orson Welles played Unicron. It's kind of hard to tell because they had to really do a lot of synthesization to be able to get him into that really deep voice. So at that point, yeah, that was his last role that he was able to do. So just a couple of other interesting ones that we can bring out. This movie takes place 20 years after the end of the Transformers second season. It's actually a bridge between the second and the third season.
Okay, yeah, that was actually something that I had to look into, because for the most part, for somebody who's never seen the 1980s animated Transformers show and then popping into this film for the first time, like you can pick up very quickly, oh, okay, this has some sort of canonical value to the television show. Where does it fit in? So I had to personally look it up so that way I had some sort of a idea of what was going on.
Yes. So yeah, it's a bridge between the second and the third season, and also the bridge between introducing a brand new toy line for it, which is one of the more interesting aspects of this film, because how did they respond to the fact that they had to have an entirely new toy line for kids to buy? Oh, let's just kill off all of the previous toy line.
I mean that makes sense. Why not?
Well, it is a war, isn't it? So at that point, that's the best way you can look at it. Also, how did you guys feel about this movie taking place in the past? Because we live in the wonderful year, the oh so wonderful year of 2022, and this was based in the distant future of 2005.
Really, I missed that detail.
Yeah, it's in the narration. It is the year 2005.
Oh,
So-
I super missed that for some reason because
Yeah.
I didn't know either.
Yeah, so it's one of those things that I laugh at, especially now looking at it in the rear view here. So the other big one, and this is technically tied to it, but also tied to the series. This is the first time a major letter writing or PTA kind of campaign went against a company, and it went against the company because of the death of Optimus Prime. Believe it or not, there was a huge letter writing campaign by moms who had their children traumatized, not because they saw it in the movie. Well, some of them did see it in the movie, but there actually was a TV episode that aired, which aired a zombie Optimus Prime. And it was technically based after the movie, because the third season was still was starting to air by the time that movie came out. So there's actually an episode where a zombie-like Optimus Prime is going to like crash a ship into the moon. And so a bunch of kids saw this before they saw the film, and that's what caused the letter writing campaign, because all of the kids were all traumatized because Optimus Prime died. So, yeah.
Oh my lord.
Yeah. It's actually one of the greatest things that actually came out of it. Interesting fact for Transformers fans, a lot of the elements that were introduced here, for example, Unicron, the Quintessons, if you remember the five-headed robots that were judges, the Quintessons, as well as characters like the Junkions, were then incorporated into Transformers lore by the comic artist, I believe his name was Simon Furman, and actually became part of the solidified canon, but not the way they were when they got brought in. So like the way that the 86 Unicron is not how current Unicron is in the movies and the series.
That's interesting.
Yes. So in the Marvel Comics adaptation of the movie, because of course they did one, Autobot City is referred to as Fortress Maximus, which is a character and toy that would come later in the third season's line of toys.
Yeah, that brings it full circle.
Yep. And still to this day, there is a debate on whether or not Autobot City is technically supposed to be Fortress Maximus or Metroplex, which are two big city transformers. Because in Japan, there was actually a film that came out just before the 86 movie called Scramble City, which was them actually showing Autobot City becoming Metroplex. So there's debate amongst the Transformers community about who the actual Autobot City is in the film. But the other thing that I also found funny is Orson Welles died, right? So
Yes.
apparently after his death, it sparked rumors that Leonard Nimoy took over and provided the voice for Unicron. However, Susan Blue has since confirmed that Welles completed the voiceover work before he died. So that's actually something I've seen bounced around quite a bit, is that Orson Welles wasn't doing well when the voice recordings were happening for this film.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point, a lot of people thought maybe he, kind of like with Christopher Lee and Saruman, where he only got brought in for the bare minimal concept. So like they only brought his voiceover in for the key scenes, and then they let somebody else do this. But Susan Blue, who plays RC in it, confirmed that he was there the entire production. So there you go. I'm trying to look into some of the other big ones. Let's see. The Sound of Galvatron's arm-mounted laser cannon firing is a modified version of Megatron's fusion cannon. So it's basically a modified version of the cannon sound effect that they would use in the series. In the Japanese trailer for the film, the footage of Galvatron during the transformation of Unicron is slightly different. Instead of Unicron dropping Galvatron in his mouth, he falls down a trapdoor on Unicron. The scene where Kup tells the Dinobots the story about the thick dust of Alpha 9 is also different, and more footage is shown. So there's various differences here, including one other thing that Kup actually, like, just curious, how did you guys like Kup? So he was he was the veteran. He was the veteran that was with Hot Rod.
The one who had all the stories to tell.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I liked him. I thought he was at first. I thought he was actually voiced by Ernest Borgnine, but he's not.
No, I can't remember. I can't remember who plays him.
A lot like Ernest Borgnine, though. But yeah, I thought he was a fun character.
Well, would it surprise you to know that you almost didn't get him?
I almost got him from the movie, huh?
No, because they wanted a veteran to go with the young Hot Rod character, but in a lot of early concepts, they actually decided that it should be like either veterans, two veterans from the first and second seasons, Ironhide and Brawn. But then I guess there was a little bit of a kerfuffle, and Ironhide and Brawn were killed off. So they instead went, oh, well, we need a character that he can, like a veteran character that he can learn stuff from. And that's how Kup was invented.
Oh, cool.
So at that point, they were originally going to do that. And then they just decided, oh, well, we'll kill off a bunch of characters. And that's what happened. But let's actually there's a bunch of stuff in here. I also like the fact that they introduced Springer, and Springer was supposed to be the, quote, Han Solo of the Transformers. I kid you not. They literally wrote him as modeled by Han Solo.
You know what? That makes sense.
Yeah. And well, they wanted to make him sound unique because he was actually the first triple changer Autobot that had ever appeared on screen. This is the funny thing about Transformers. When there's like a new toy or whatever, the Decepticon version will usually get on screen first to give a disadvantage to the Autobots. And then rarely, it happens, but it's rare, where we will get the Autobot version in the cartoon as well, and Springer's one of those. where he was actually a triple changer. They actually showed him as a triple changer, and they just decided, okay, well, we got to make this guy unique. And at that time, I guess the people who were drawing were big into Indiana Jones and Star Wars, and they just decided, well, we'll just make him sound like Han Solo. We'll make him a dashing rogue kind of thing.
Okay, yeah.
And this one, I actually brought this up in the watch party, but did you guys notice that there was like this weird relationship kind of teasing and flirting that were happening between RC and Springer and Hot Rod?
I did notice that.
So originally in one of the early scripts, she was supposed to have a thing for Hot Rod. And instead, they decided that because they were going to go in the direction that they were with Hot Rod, they instead tried to fix the script a little bit so that then she falls for Springer and goes with Springer, because she's actually like some of the scripts for season 3 had been written and she was interested in Springer at that point. So that's why if you listen to the weird flirting that happens and nothing happens between RC and Hot Rod, it's because they changed their minds. And she went with Springer instead. Okay, so with that, let's actually get into the goods and the bads here. What did this film do positively for you? I will
Pretty banging soundtrack.
Oh my god, that soundtrack is freaking amazing. I have no problem telling you, Brinton, I have bought that soundtrack like 5 times.
I completely support this because I have bought many things in my lifetime, like 5 or more times.
Yeah, I literally, especially when it was rare to get, like right when CDs were happening, it was really rare to get a copy of the Transformers the movie soundtrack, and I had 2 versions of that because I ran one of them into the ground, and then I basically broke the other one, and then thankfully the anniversary, or not the anniversary, but the re-release that they did for the 2007 film had come out, and so that was like 3, and then so on and so forth. But I love that damn soundtrack so much. So I would definitely give that. I will just say this is the first time I had seen this film in any kind of high definition. It's been a while since I'd seen the film, and I should have watched it for like its 30th anniversary and all that, but just didn't get around to it. And holy crap, this movie was gorgeous to me in 4K. It really was. So I will give the animation, and you're giving the soundtrack. Alex, what positives could you take away from the film?
I also want to give a positive to the animation. I think it's a very well animated film. Especially I like the design of Unicron and how it's this giant imposing planet at first.
Mm. Yeah, I especially love that. And also the soundtrack that they made for it just helped with the design, because it just made this thing seem imposing and otherworldly and dangerous in its own quiet way. Like it's kind of like if you've ever, I can't remember who said it, but like if you stare long enough into the void stares back. That's kind of how Unicron feels and is supposed to feel throughout this.
Yeah, for sure.
I will say that the voice acting it has a couple of hiccups here and there, but I actually do think that most of the characters give amazing performances.
Yeah, I agree. You got a really stellar cast across the whole spectrum here.
Yeah, including Judd Nelson, Judd Nelson played Hot Rod, and I believe that he had just come off of The Breakfast Club, and so that was like his breakout movie. And so putting him in here so that kids knew like The Breakfast Club as well as this was a good idea, and he gave a good performance as the young Hot Rod. And eventually into Rodimus Prime. So that's another one that I'll give. Brinton, any other positives?
I'm afraid that's all I got for you.
You love the soundtrack.
Just that. Well, considering that's what I was most distracted by. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Any other positives, Alex?
think that's kind of it for me. Just good voice cast for all the Transformers. And again, I thought the animation really looked very nice and was really eye catching.
Mm-hmm. How did you guys actually react to the fact that this is a kids movie and it has lots of death in it? Especially like I said, they had to kill off the entire toy line. Now some did survive, but you had like a lot of what would basically have been in rated R films as like a very gory death. For example, I remember Rising Sun was a little taken aback when the police car Prowl gets shot, and you see the fire kind of coming out of his eyes, almost like blood being spit out after being shot.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm not too surprised by the death. I feel like animation in the 80s tended to be a little darker, a little more serious. Even some of Disney stuff had some pretty serious animations. I mean, Disney in the 80s had like The Black Cauldron and The Great Mouse Detective, so
they're not the only ones. Like you had a bunch of people going in very dark turns, but I remember like this was a big deal, especially for parents in the 80s, seeing stuff like that. I remember like my mom did not take well to Bambi's mom getting killed or like what was it? The Little Mermaid, like some of the scenes of the Little Mermaid set my mom off quite a bit. A bunch of them were just like really dark, and it's kind of surprising considering that they're children's films, or at least it's considered to be.
It's just a very different time, so it doesn't surprise me too much. It's just like, it's just kind of the time. I guess you could definitely argue it certainly is a little more violent than the other movies, but it's very cartoonish robot violence. It's not like people on people or creature on creature, like say The Secret of NIMH, for example.
NIMH is a whole other level, and even like because you brought up the Michael Bay films. I actually I don't even think you can judge them on a similar scale, because I would argue that those movies are gory in their own right in a lot of cases. So at that point, it's difficult to be able to compare them. But Brenton, were you set off at all by like such dark death happening, like this actually becoming a war film, but it's supposed to be a kids movie?
Not entirely, just because we are in an age of Marvel, and I feel, especially with the transition from the Infinity Saga going into the Multiverse Saga, and with children really being into superhero movies, that it's something that we've become desensitized to. Yeah. So as I was watching it, it was just kind of like, okay. It's nothing that I'm like not accustomed to anymore. So like, and I feel bad for saying that, because I don't think it's something that we should become desensitized to. And yet we are. Or at least I'm speaking. I guess I should speak for myself. I am.
Well, I mean, me and Alex have had this discussion a couple of times. Like it's funny that kids these days can see like the most grotesque, violent displays put on film, but you show one boob, and that's where we cross the line, kind of thing. And it gets. What's the word I'm looking for? It gets a little disorienting a little bit, just because it's like, which would I rather see? Somebody literally getting their head ripped off, or a nipple, an accidental nipple that falls out of a shirt?
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm going to go with the nipple. I'm just going to, like, I know I'm a guy and all that, but I think I'm going to go with the nipple at that point.
Well, I mean, what? I mean, but is it a nipple from a woman or a man, Adam?
Either or.
I mean, for me, if it was like a woman, that's traumatizing.
Okay, let me put it in this aspect then. Which would you rather see? A guy getting his head ripped off, or a guy's pants accidentally drop trow and you get to see his manly ass?
second option.
See, there you go. Like that's like I'm actually more towards like the pleasant experience. I've done so much blood and gore in my life that it's just like, yeah, this is getting gross after a while.
Right.
But
Yeah, I agree with you, and I totally understand what you're saying. There comes a point when it like enough is enough. Like I've seen it once, I've seen it twice, I've seen it 100 times.
Yeah.
Like let's do something different.
Mhm.
For the and for the sake of this conversation, I mean, I'm definitely thinking about it more from the mindset of someone who just watched this film for the first time in 2022.
Yeah.
So thinking about it in terms of like 1986, that's definitely pretty extreme.
Yes.
And if there was anybody my age at that point in time who was like, hell yeah, Transformers, I'm like completely caught up with everything. And oh my gosh, what the hell is happening? That is definitely a lot. There's a lot going on there. And then it's like, how on earth am I going to be able to carry on into season 3? Like, how can I manage?
There were a lot of kids that didn't know. I mean, and what's funny is that G.I. Joe basically had the same situation. They did an animated movie, and it actually was supposed to translate into later seasons. And apparently, for some reason, G.I. Joe handled better than Transformers did, just because a lot of kids were very attached to their G1, their original first season G1 characters. Specifically, this actually lets me get into this question. What did you guys think about the push for Hot Rod to basically then be put into the mantle of leadership with Rodimus Prime in this?
I like the concept. I think it's kind of bold for a movie and a show that's largely aimed to push toys, right? To kind of shake up the status quo, right? I have to imagine if Transformers is what 2-3 seasons in for TV at this point.
They were 2 seasons in, and by the time the film had been aired, like season 3 was starting to air.
Yeah, so Optimus was obviously he's the leader. He's the grand main character we all rally behind if you've been watching the show religiously as a kid back then. So I think it was actually a pretty bold move to suddenly like, oh yeah, we're gonna kind of kill off the main character, the main leader we went into, and now shake up the status quo. Kind of a good example for me growing up would have been like when Power Rangers changed up the original 3.
Oh yeah, because Turbo would have been your time. So at that point, like changing from Tommy to TJ kind of thing.
Yeah, and even before then, when like Jason and Jason, Trini, and Zach, their characters left the show, and a new group of characters came in. So so I can imagine that was for me what this was probably for kids back then who watched this, who grew up on Transformers and went to see this movie.
The reason I bring it up is actually that story element has become a bit of a controversy in the BotCon community, because a lot of people actually were very frustrated that Bumblebee at that time, who was like starting in season 1, he was the young up and comer. Hence why 2007 put Bumblebee in that role again. He was supposed to be like the young up and comer that looked up to Optimus Prime and eventually became him. And basically what the film did was they took the character that they had been priming for 2 seasons and then completely disregarded him, and instead went with this new young up and coming Hot Rod character. And also season 3's writing does not help Rodimus, unfortunately. But now that I've actually said that, Brinton, what do you think about the fact that Bumblebee, who was the young character, is basically getting oversighted for a new toy line character?
So this is the part of the conversation where I get to openly admit that this is when I'm taking the step back to kind of look at the movie from a whole, because I felt like from the second that the film started to the second that the film ended, it was nonstop fighting and war and battles to a soundtrack with like fairly little exposition. And I think I'm just used to the exposition that in movies today and not how exposition was communicated in the 1980s. Because just from the conversation I'm listening between you and Alex, I'm now starting to realize like reasonable parts of the plot that I completely missed, because there was, for me, the movie was just so, like, the movie overshadowed a plot with like nonstop 80s pop and rock and like lots of fighting.
Yeah, okay. No, you're not wrong. I mean, like, it's actually kind of funny. So that's 1986, right? Now let's go to like a later generation with this is a good an example as I can think of right now, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, where you don't have that many action scenes. You have a lot more exposition that is trying to set a world together. So at that point, yeah, we're talking about two completely different kinds of films being made for different generations of kids. And unfortunately, like in the 80s, that's how kids were brought in, was a bunch of action. And even in like franchises as tame as like My Little Pony or Care Bears, you had action scenes in them.
Yep, I remember those, not My Little Pony because I don't care, but Care Bears, 100%. I remember there being just like so much, hey, here's this fun fight because we're Care Bears, followed by like hugs and kisses, followed by here's another fun fight.
Yeah, because that's what they had to do.
Band-Aid.
It just worked. That's the way it goes. And so now seeing like some of these later, I mean, another example in Transformers is the Transformers Prime film, Beast Hunters Predacon Rising, that they did back in the 2010s. And there's a lot more exposition there than there are fight. Basically, it's a bunch of exposition that leads into one big fight scene at the end, kind of like Two Towers, where it's all building to the Helm's Deep kind of scene. So you have little action scenes here and there, little skirmishes, but overall, it's much more exposition happening. So it's interesting to see like how the generations were back then and what kids were being raised on then, as opposed to what they're being raised on now. So I would totally agree on that.
And I mean, and it goes to show, it goes to show not to like age or date the three of us, but it definitely shows like that we grew up in very different time periods, and just to like Adam, like just a little bit better, and Brenton like that a little bit better, and this catches Alex's attention a little bit better, and there's nothing wrong with that.
No, because correct me if I'm wrong. Like my first Transformers series was G1, so at that point, like when you were a kid, Brenton, it probably would have been Beast Wars, maybe.
That is accurate.
Yeah, so at that point, like, we're talking different aesthetics and everything like that. I mean, I love Beast Wars. So at that point, like, you could have a conversation there, but even I've got to admit, there are tons of differences between how Beast Wars worked as a series compared to how G1 did. For example, weapons actually hit things. that was actually, it's one of the things that I kind of laugh at now, but like G1, dear God, all of them had the aim of stormtroopers. They really did.
Waiting for the stormtrooper comment with that.
Yes, you're not wrong on that. And then when we went into Beast Wars, like you actually had impacts of weapons a lot more often. So yeah, that's definitely a different thing. So those are some of the positives. What did this movie do wrong?
I want to echo what Brenton was saying about sort of the lack of exposition in this movie. Okay. I do have to kind of agree, because some of the scenes are kind of jarring, the way they skip. And part of me understands, because it's a kid's movie, so they want to fit it into a very, very lean runtime. This movie's just a little over 90 minutes here. But I was like, you could have at least transitioned some of the scenes a little cleanly. Like, when the two Autobots are in the prison to go face judgment, and it's like, first you see the older one taken away after he briefly explains who he is. And it's
Yeah,
like, well,
Grenix. Because
Yeah.
he was basically supposed to be one of the things that introduces this threat coming. Because before then, remember, the Ultra Magnus's crew had heard about a planetary threat going to Cybertron. And this was supposed to basically say, okay, this group, they get to know what it's called because this guy's planet was destroyed at the very beginning of the film. And yeah,
Exactly.
I'll agree with you. It's not clearly explained. And one of the reasons being is because they had to emphasize the action for the kids.
yeah. And it's like, first you see him taken away, then he's Judgment, and then it goes to another scene with some other characters for a while. Then it's back to them again, and all of a sudden now they're being marched out onto the blank to be thrown into the pit. And
Yeah.
then they just kind of miraculously escape the pit. Kind of no like explanation. I know how they did it, but it's like, well, wait,
Yeah.
you were bounded. How did you manage to transform all of a sudden? So yeah, that I
Oh,
would say the movie's
The
editing's a
bindings
little
actually
jarring.
let go as soon as they dropped in the pit.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I totally missed that. So
yeah,
there you
it's
go.
one of those fun little things, just like, oh, you guys are sadistic. You're going to let them try and fight back before they're eaten alive by the Sharkticons. That's gross. But yeah, no, I think you're totally right. And actually what's kind of funny is like the Two Towers and the Return of the King did a similar kind of deal where we followed multiple plot lines going on at the same time. And I'm not saying that it's better or worse, because you can't compare the two. The run times are way too, like, it's way more significant. They had more to be able to do. But a lot of that is these groups of characters going through different experiences while this is going on with another group of characters. And unfortunately, because of the 90-minute runtime, they just couldn't emphasize a lot of that.
Yeah, for sure.
So, Brinton, any negatives that you want to point out?
So, I mean, there is something else besides what I was just briefly talking about with the lack of exposition. And this is something, like, I'm not going to take credit for this. This is actually something that Jason and I were talking about after the fact. So this is like his words, not so much mine. However, I do agree with him. And that is for it, it's mid 1980s. Depicting the distant future of 2005, and like there were cassettes and boom boxes. They couldn't have thought of anything a little bit more futuristic.
I think the more emphasis was just the futuristic cars. Hey, look, everybody, it's the future. We have futuristic cars now.
Yeah, that didn't really do it
No.
for Jason, and honestly, like it doesn't really do it for me either.
No, because in all honesty, like, you're not wrong, because there's actually been a lot of debate on that too. Because if you're like in one of the first episodes of G1, and if you've seen like the Netflix series, they show that they had different transformed forms. They, like Starscream wasn't just an F-15 the entire time. It actually did have like he actually did like have a Cybertronian transformation, and so a lot of people have been just like, well, then who's to say that Hot Rod didn't have that form when he was on Cybertron, and he didn't just scan another car? Like we don't know that for certain, but that was basically their emphasis, is that this is 2005. Hey, look, we're all in cool onesie uniforms, as well as we have hoverboards. If people remember that Daniel had that little hoverboard that got broken by Hot Rod.
Right.
Because The Rock didn't destroy it, but Hot Rod did, and that's like your only connection. It's like, oh, look, futuristic cars. But then again, I mean, I just love going back to films now, because what was Back to the Future 2? It was 2015?
Yeah, 2015.
And then you just go back to them and it's like, huh, we are nowhere near that. And
Well, that was what I was about to bring up, is the
Mhm.
fact that Back to the Future 2, also a movie from the 80s, in the not too distant future of 2015, showed things that were way more like futuristic than a movie from this same time period depicting 10 years earlier in 2005, with very little to no futuristic like depiction. So it was interesting. And so it kind of brings up the case, was this movie potentially a rush job? And because it was the 1980s, nobody cared about quality like we do in 2022.
I can tell you that this was a bit of a rush job, and it's primarily because season 3 was pretty much done, I think, at that point, and so they were getting ready to air them. And so at that point, they needed to have this movie come out to be able to bridge the gap, because kids were walking in and going, "Hey, who's this guy? We've never seen him before." And so they had to basically do that. So there was a little bit of a rush job there.
Well, I'm glad to know that time management has improved.
Well, I think also the problem was that you had Toei and Marvel having to work together, and I remember that was a complicated situation, just because, you know, across oceans, we didn't have the internet at that point.
True.
So, yeah, so I will actually point out that one of the things that I don't necessarily like about the film, and I love this film, I have an affection for it, but this film was basically trying to do a peek into what season 3 was going to be about, which was going outside of the planet Earth, actually going to explore other planets and helping them out. And unfortunately, all you get are basically what look like to be 2 colonies that get shown off. Like, it isn't even a full planet. It's like an island in space. And you get 2 of them. Well, technically 3, because of the planet that Unicron eats at the beginning. But ultimately, like, space exploration for 90 minutes, there isn't a whole lot shown. I would actually say there was probably more with the planet of Junk than there was on the other planet.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And what's even cooler is in season 3, they actually, and hence why, like, if they had more time with this, I would have loved to have shown them, because there were actually other planets that were tired of the Autobot Decepticon war. And so we're either pleading neutrality or basically saying, get the F off our planet. We do not want your conflict here. Stuff like that. So, okay, another dislike?
For me, it would be the constant flashing animation. Oh, God, it gave me a headache.
Yeah.
I just had to wonder how many kids had seizures watching this.
I don't remember there being a major seizure warning, but it probably happened. I mean, this was special effects at the time. And even now, like, what's funny is I've watched this film numerous times, and now that I'm in my late 20s and now into my late 30s, now I start to get headaches from watching a lot of that. But I used to think those were so cool as a kid. Like, this is the advancement of CGI technology at the time, and it's not, but it's still, like, pretty cool. Brinton, any other dislikes?
Apart from the comments I've made so far, honestly, like, at the end of the day, I know at the start of this, I joked, like, oh, it was a movie. But I really do love Transformers. It's something that's been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. Yeah. Hell, I even like those rather crappy Michael Bay ones with Shia LaBeouf, and that's saying a lot because those were not good movies. But I enjoyed myself. It made for a great little date evening with my partner, and apart from just the sheer chaos that the 90 minutes was, it wasn't too bad. So I don't have anything more to say beyond what I've already communicated.
So unfortunately, guys, we were not able to do the audio clips because I had a little bit of an audio kerfuffle there. But I did actually want to bring up some of the bigger moments in it, which is basically like the entrance of Galvatron, because like one of the most graphic deaths is the death of Starscream in this, and holy shit, nothing has been more graphic than that ever, in my opinion. So,
yeah, that was definitely something. I'll give you that.
how did you feel about that when you saw it?
Well, I mean, again, desensitized.
Yeah, I actually.
I mean, the comment I made when I was watching it with Jason was, he got Thanos.
Yeah, he basically became dust, and then it gets even better with Leonard Nimoy Galvatron stepping on the crown, and would anyone else attempt to fill his shoes? Yeah, Leonard Nimoy steals the show as Galvatron, as far as I'm concerned. Like, I love Frank Welker as Megatron, and eventually in the series he would be Galvatron, but Leonard, there's a reason they brought him back in Dark of the Moon to be a villain character for the Transformers movies, because he has the voice for
good at it.
Yeah, he's really good at it, and I know it's blasphemy to say this, but I do believe that Dark of the Moon is actually like a really good episode. It actually is a really good episode plot, and so it probably shouldn't have been a movie, but it was kind of cool to be able to see him. Leonard Nimoy played Sentinel Prime in that, and actually having an Autobot turn for similar reasons as the Decepticons, but probably even further extreme. So I'll at least say that. But overall, the other thing that I want to get into here is, as we did this in the Alien review, we're going to do the what if kind of award show. Obviously in the Oscar environment, all this thing would ever qualify for would probably be like best sound design or best animation. But I'll expand it really quick. Do you either of you feel like any of the characters in this film would be deserving of a nomination or even win in like a best actor or supporting actor kind of situation? See, for me, like when I was thinking about it, not in like a main actor kind of situation. I don't think I would ever give it. But in supporting, there may be a few, but I think they would only get the nomination, they wouldn't win.
I think. I mean, I feel that there would be a fair amount. Excuse me, a fair amount of nominations dished out. Win per se, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly, but because there's different degrees. Getting nominated is still an honor in and of itself, or at least back then it used to be. And so at that point, like getting that nomination and then winning it is just, it's on another level. Like for example, I would have no problem nominating Susan Blue for like best supporting actress to play RC, because I mean, considering that this is like the first time a female Transformer is shown on screen, it's not a bad performance. It really isn't. It's actually probably better than a lot of stuff that was coming out around that time.
With that, actually.
And in fact, that's one of the cooler concepts is they continue to bring back Susan Blue to play RC. Believe it or not, she actually played, or she didn't play RC in it, but I think she played Elita 1 in the Netflix series.
Oh, way cool.
So yeah, Susan Blue is like one of the few people that keeps getting brought back to reprise her roles for that. But she's one that I would nominate, and then probably another supporting actor. It's tough to say because I can't really go with Judd Nelson. I might go with Robert Stack, because this is like, primarily because all I know Robert Stack from, aside from this, is Rescue 911. So at that point, it's like
Shatner.
Which is the one that Stack did?
Unsolved Mysteries.
Unsolved Mysteries. Why do I keep on getting that mixed up? So yeah, so at that point, like, this is actually Robert Stack not narrating; it's him actually acting. I'll tell you what, I would give Best Supporting Actor to John Machida, because for crying out loud, man, that guy can speak a literal mile a minute.
I mean, that is pretty insanely crazy and awesome. So,
and he's actually one of the other ones. So John Machida has come back to play Blur a number of times. The recent stuff, no, but like the last time, did you ever see Transformers Animated, Brenton?
No, I unfortunately have not.
So that was the last time John Machida played Blur, is in that series. And after
Okay.
that, I think he's since passed away after that, but I'm not sure. So, but even then, like, Blur kind of went in a different direction, so they didn't need to have a supersonic fast speaker to play him.
That's a good point.
I even remember there was a point where Hasbro wanted to start beef on Twitter with Sega about who was actually faster, Sonic the Hedgehog or Blur.
Oh my gosh.
Gotta love brand Twitters.
It actually did take off too. There was actual talk between, I can't remember who had the Transformers comic at the time. I want to say it was Boom Studios and the people who were doing the Sonic comic. They thought about doing a crossover just one time, but it never came to fruition. So that's kind of the sad part. So out of 10, what would you give Transformers the movie 1986?
For me, it would be a 6.
Okay.
Well, Adam, you know that I do things on a scale to 5 because this is easier on my brain. I would give it a 3.
Okay. So both of you are kind of middle of the road. I would give it a 9 out of 10. Like, I have major nostalgia glasses for this, but I do acknowledge that it does have some issues. And it doesn't necessarily translate well compared to other stuff that's coming out around this time. So for me, it was a great film, but I was a kid at that point. So it works out. So, but I could still see a lot of the flaws in it and still love it for them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
I completely agree with you, and
Okay.
I I completely agree with you. So you rate that however you want. I have rated things based in nostalgia, so like I love it.
Okay. And one thing that I actually want to do just on my own personal kind of level, compared to the 2007 Transformers film, which in your opinion is better? It's kind of tough to be able to do it, but I think this is actually a fun thing to be able to do.
Yeah, I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for it, but I would still say I prefer the 2007 movie a little more.
Okay, and is it for the reasons that you've been saying, where not a whole lot of exposition for the previous film?
Yeah, I get it. The 2007 movie is just kind of goofy, but the whole franchise is goofy too. But I think the 2007 movie just kind of sets itself up a little better.
Okay.
And I feel like even if it is kind of a movie for kids, so to speak, the 2007 movie, I think it still kind of takes itself a little more seriously, and the action's a little more cohesive.
Okay.
I mean, granted, the action is cohesive in the animation because it's the advantage of animation, so they can show a lot more. But when you think of the constraints of live action and how they had to present something like that into live action,
Uh-huh.
I think what Bay did was kind of clever. It's like, how do I make robots work in the real world?
Yeah.
So he kind of thought about how to make all the moving parts can mesh into one. The cartoon certainly gives itself more of a break for logic, where it's like, okay, they can be this giant sentient robot and transform perfectly into a truck without any thought, because it's a cartoon. You accept that.
Yeah.
So that's where I stand. I like the 2007 movie just a little more than the 86 movie, but the 86 movie was fine.
Okay. Brinton, what about you?
I think I already stated that I like the Michael Bay Shia LaBeouf Transformers, so I'm gonna have to go with that as well.
Okay.
I mean, I'm just like Alex. Him and I are going to be on a burning boat together, so I mean, you're not going to be alone in this one, my friend.
Okay.
So we'll just be arm in arm singing Kumbaya as we slowly suffocate to the fumes. Why I'm being very dramatic today.
You make it sound like we're at war. I mean, look, I will pick 86, but that's just because I have huge nostalgia glasses on. I like 2007, but I can also acknowledge what it did wrong in a lot of its cases. So, like, for example, too much emphasis on the Shia LaBeouf character and all the human storylines, which is where I would much like to have more emphasis on the Autobots and Decepticons, because that's what I'm interested in. But overall, like, I can't really fault 2007. It actually was a good pace setter for, unfortunately, a couple of the catastrophes that came after that. But it still is, like, by far, I mean, like, I'll set out Dark of the Moon as being one of the better ones, and even Bumblebee I'll set up as being a good one. But compared to, like, Revenge of the Fallen, Last Night, and Age of Extinction, 2007 by far is better. Especially with what it was trying to do. Okay.
Yeah, like,
I will say, if they had taken the basic plot of this movie and transformed it, pun intended, pun maybe intended, I don't know, but if they had taken a lot of the story elements of this movie and put it into live action, I think I would have enjoyed it the same, because I do like a lot of the ideas, and I liked the Junk Planet, I liked the Judgment Planet. It's just there felt like there needed to be a few more things to fill into the middle to make the plot more cohesive and coherent.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Unfortunately, it looks like we'll, because I think Transformers 6 is still going to happen. But this time they're going to bring the Beast Wars elements into it. But originally what they were going to do was they were going to go with the Transformers Prime. Unicron is actually the planet Earth itself kind of plot line. Because that's what it was teasing at in last night's ending credit scene, is like you could see the beginnings of Unicron coming out of the Earth.
Right.
So that's unfortunately that's probably where they're going to go with it. But I agree with you. If you had like Unicron as an existing threat in the universe, and they had to go and stop it before it came to Earth, that actually would have been a cool thing. All right, and I think that'll actually go ahead and do it for this episode. So overall, I'm glad that I get why you guys had your issues with it, but I'm overall glad that you guys walked away enjoying it. So at that point, like, you had a good experience nonetheless with it. And I'm actually also happy to announce that, thankfully, you will not have... all of the people who are listening here are not going to have to wait too long for the next Geek News Movie Night, because we've actually been working in the background to be able to set this next one up. And it's still going to be a poll that people can vote on, but it's going to be based on movies that have anniversaries in 2022. And we'll even keep a couple of those films to be able to do later, because a lot of the films that we were picking, the three of us, as well as I think I've even shown it to Shay and Rising Sun and a few others, a lot of them are just really great films that we could totally go off on these ones. So what's basically going to happen is, for our first little poll, I'm going to take separate anniversaries, one that's really close and one and maybe one that's really far, and just let people pick what the next big Geek News Movie Night is about. So you guys can look forward to that. In the meantime, though, if you guys want to be able to reach out and give your thoughts on Transformers the movie, obviously go ahead and leave a comment down below. We really do appreciate it. But if people want to be able to check out Alex and be able to ask questions about this movie or his own content, how do they get a hold of you, Alex?
You can find me on YouTube. Shadow Blizzard 3000 is my channel, and I do have anime-related content. Kind of fitting, because this movie was partially animated by Toei, so there you go.
Yeah, so that was actually the way that we brought in Rising Sun, which is like, hey, this can be your anime for the night. Why? Because it was made by Toei. So, and it worked. Yes. Brinton, how do people get a hold of you?
They can reach me through you.
Yes, I am apparently the personal answering service.
My personal secretary. I am super kidding. You can also reach out to me at Ciatore30, CIATORE 30 on Twitter, if you so dare.
All right. And that'll go ahead and do it for us. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode, and also continuing to show support for the RSS feed, which you can do so at Amazon Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Player.fm, so you guys can join us all in those platforms. And then later on, we have changed this since then. Eventually, this will also go to YouTube, and YouTube, you get to be able to enjoy this with also the subtle inching towards the RSS feed to be able to support us there, because it actually does help when it goes over there as well. So thank you guys so much for your continued support. We really do appreciate it. If people want to reach out to me, the best way to be able to do so is on Twitter at GeekyNRO, which is my handle, and I will get back to you hopefully as soon as I possibly can. Or if you want to be able to write a quick letter or send a quick email to us, you can do so at geekyweek@gmail.com. And that'll go ahead and do it for this Geek News Movie Night. When we see you guys next time, we will be wrapping up the month of October. And who knows what we'll actually be talking about. We have plenty of announcements to be able to go into, some of the horror variety, and some that are just plain silly. But at that point, we will see you guys for the next GNRO podcast. Until then, have a good day or night, and stay safe.